Okay, ladies and gentlemen, fellow councillors, I don't think present in the room we have any members of the public as such, but to members of the public who may have tuned in, welcome this sunny Tuesday morning here in Bideford, and welcome to this month's meeting of Torridge District Council's Internal Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Let us start this meeting, please, with apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies from Councillor Cottle-Hunkin and Councillor Elliott, and also the Chief Executive and the ICT Strategy and Performance Manager. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And don't worry, Councillor Lovell, we are just doing the opening credits, so you're in. Just. I would take. Hopefully, we might be done by then. That's a good target, and I know there are other councillors present who have to. I'll take this opportunity before we go further or go into the minutes to welcome Councillor Hodgson here on my left, who comes to the committee and takes on the role of Vice Chair. Welcome.
Thank you.
There's a rush. Moving to the minutes from the last meeting, which was held on the 18th of June. Waterloo Day, for those who keep a record of such events. By page number in the minutes, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9, Councillor Pennington.
Yeah, I'm not arguing any longer. I was hoping you would thank me for my services as Vice Chair as well. Would you welcome?
It slipped my mind. Don't worry, Councillor Pennington. No slight intended. Yes.
Okay, just the...
I'm happy that is a record.
Just going to add, actually Torridge already produced those figures. They're produced to external scrutiny. So any information, so I think that's probably why it wasn't proposed, because it's not seconded, because it isn't necessary information they give us.
If that is the explanation, can you please record that? I accept.
I think to be correct of the event at the time, it was a proposal that you made. There was no second, and therefore
You did give me a chance to ask for a second.
the explanation as to why it was not a question that was relevant to this committee, because it was relevant actually to external. Thank you.
It's not just left as an exception.
All right. Got that? Thank you. Moving on, page 10 and page 11. Those who were present, can I have a vote as to the accuracy of those minutes, please? And a seconder. So, proposal that those minutes are accurate, please. Councillor Bright. I can second it from the chair. Those in favour? 5. And abstaining, please? 3. Moving on to the act on pages 12 onwards. Starting at the top. I think that one, the first minute is now, it says ongoing, but, well, yes, it is until we see a reserves policy. I suppose it doesn't require any more action from us at the moment. 322, that is complete, which was the detail of the appeals in planning enforcement. That can come off. 323, we haven't got anything further on that at the moment. That remains on communications plan for listed buildings, and indeed we were talking about this in a different environment only the other day. That was the involvement of the down to parish councils, etc., because we accepted that the general public and the parish councils and town councils were very much the eyes and ears, and they were the people who could help in monitoring the state of listed buildings and reporting back because we didn't have the capacity to go and inspect them all ourselves. And then items of income from the charity events held and how they contributed to car parking income. There we have the response there from Pete Hudson, which shows the income from the different events. Any follow-up or question on that? Good. That can, as a result, finish. 331. Sorry, Councillor Lavelle. Sorry, I missed you.
Just, does the farmers' food market, that counts as a charitable event? Does it, the farmers' market? I thought they're commercial.
You're right, Councillor Lavelle. It's not a charitable event.
I suspect the error there is the description of them as charity events rather than it's events that are permitted or whatever. But technically, you're absolutely right. It is a commercial event. Moving on, 331. That was to ask clarification as to how the figure of 85 affordable houses that's been delivered, how that figure had been arrived at. And there we have a response, which I'll let you read through. As we know, the point she's making there is that at the outset, numbers of affordable housing can be determined in planning applications, etc. Thereafter, the local planning authority often doesn't have control over the final delivery because of various things kick in, the viability studies, etc. So I'm happy with it.
Sorry, isn't that appalling?
Sorry?
Isn't that appalling that we have no control, that we see that we're going to have 85 and then we have no control over?
And they have to be, if the numbers are adjusted, they have to be justified, and you can't just change it. But there is this process by which has its flaws, that once developments are approved and affordable houses are included within the permission, down track, when other unforeseen costs and circumstances come, once they start to cut the turf, etc., developers have recourse to appeal against that, in effect appeal against that decision and have affordable housing numbers adjusted, because what they call, is it viability? It's viability, because at that point they are able to, prove that actually things have become more expensive and it's not viable to actually build the extra number of houses. That is something which has been, on a national scale, is being at the moment, I know, because it is a vulnerability in the system. I don't know, I've got, Steve, you've got more to...
I was just going to say, legally they're entitled to apply to amend a planning permission. So I understand your disappointment, but once that's happened, that they're able to apply, and we have to determine that. So that's where we are. So it's not necessarily a Torridge, it's a national legislation that once that's granted, they can do what's called a Section 73 application to amend the planning permission.
Councillor Hodgson, lead member for housing as well.
Well, I share Councillor Lavelle's disappointment. It's one that has vexed me for all the time I've been here. However, the new government's proposals are to empower districts, planning authorities to be much more rigorous in their... Now, how we are going to be much more rigorous is yet to be determined, and what ability we will have. But there have been cases where it's gone to appeal and it has been adjudicated that the developers paid too much for the site originally, and it was their fault, basically. So the deal wasn't upheld. Now, whether we are strong enough together, and I think nationally we may well be, that we start to do this and we start to challenge these viability issues. That's what I'd like to see, and I would be very supportive of any move across our county and across nationally. So from my perspective, that's where I stand, and yes, I agree with you. We can't tolerate it. We need that affordable housing, and we can't drop it to from 30% that was originally agreed. So, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. This seems to be the way it always goes. Any large organisation have done their homework, they've been advised thoroughly, and when it comes to it, they all say they got the figures wrong, and we've got to back down and allow it. I know there are a couple of outstanding ones at the moment, and they have applied for retroactive removal of some of the planning permissions. Now, they shouldn't have had them in the first place, and probably the only reason they got planning permission in the first place is that they were telling us that they had so many properties which were affordable. It's very bad. I think we really must tighten it up, and I think we've been advised, pardon, I'm sure you'll correct me if I'm wrong, that we hold fast to that, and we really resist the application, the retrospective application to get rid of section 103, is it? I know there are a couple of these ongoing at the moment.
I think that to round that one, it's a useful discussion. To round that one, the Council now is looking forward to the opportunity, once the law is changed, to be able to be much more robust, and hopefully in conjunction and in collaboration with other councils in the country to be able to take a united stand against this. But at the moment, it isn't within the gift of the council. It's determined by law. The appeals to it. It's not our decision in terms of the appeals to the planning thing. So only when the law is changed can we adopt a new stance. Is that correct?
Obviously, we can refuse. We right as a planning authority, but we are at risk of being taken to appeal, and if our grounds aren't to actually evidence that, it will be a costly experience. So it's not that we can't, it's about capacity, it's about finance, and there are significant issues. One of the other things that we need to think about is our partnerships with our registered social landlords who take on the management of a lot of affordable homes, and whether they have the capacity, willingness, appetite, whatever, to do that. And that is something that we as a team are actually working at, to have those conversations with our registered social landlords to find out exactly where we stand. Because that is another risk if we haven't got the management capacity to take on those properties.
I'm going to, Councillor, I'm going to jump in and stop this one, because this isn't actual business work here, but it's and there's nothing that this action review discussion can come up with in terms of further action, but it's very much work in progress, and there are clear intents to try to harden, but it's not just a question of clicking fingers. Houses, the bulk of houses are built as you know, commercial enterprises, and one's got to still let people and encourage people to build. Likewise, you know, there's other sections, whether it's social housing or whether it's housing association provider, or indeed ourselves even, ways that we're looking at the moment. But it's a difficult, but outside of the initial planning permission, thereafter, a level of control we have starts to reduce slightly, because other people are able to impose the ability to appeal, etc. So I don't want to take it further at this point, because it's...
I just want a point of clarification from what Councillor Hudson said, if that's okay. You mentioned it was down to us to accept or reject the application. Are you talking the initial application, or are you talking about the application to remove the clauses?
I'm talking about for a variation to the conditions.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. Moving on down, I'm looking at the request, which in fact came, Councillor Pennington touched on it earlier, in that committee request for Board of Active Torridge to produce data detailing figures, number of membership, footfall, etc. I see that email was sent to Sean Kearney there. So is that that you referred to? Because there's no comment here that...
If members would like it produced to this committee, we can ask Active Torridge of that. I know that they've got a system now in place which easily records all of that data. So, I mean, Active Torridge have reported to external. They could equally report to internal. It covers both functions. So we could ask actually Active Torridge to come and do that presentation and include those data figures if members were minded to have that presented here at a later stage.
On previous conversations that have taken place in this committee and have actually occurred over quite a period of time, I'm pleased to hear that interpretation, that the different elements of Active Torridge are shared between the two committees. There is Torridge money involved in Active Torridge, and therefore we have an interest in it. Active Torridge on a different day is able to view the fact that it is one step removed from the council and therefore is the business of external. I have previously commented on the lack of ability to see the detail that we can then compare performance 1 year to the next. That comes actually in their annual figures, but I think my reference to it was opaque. I'd go on to say it's still very cloudy. So actually, yes, can we confirm that as a formal request? I think because the material, I'm not wanting to inflict additional work on officers, but the work is already out there because you've done it for external. So we would like to see it as well, please. I think because we have half an interest.
I totally agree in terms of the funding, and that is most certainly an internal scrutiny option. The only thing I was going to add, you might want to, we've got a full council, an extraordinary full council meeting coming up in October. I think it's 14th of October, and that's in relation to leisure. So you might want to hold until that presentation's been done and discussed at full council.
Chair.
Views of the committee on it.
Just to echo the comments, we have in the past sometimes done a joint internal external group meeting, and that has been quite helpful in the past. It may be that we haven't had the need to do it recently, but I do wonder if, because active storage is such a crossover between the two, and that it maybe warrants something of that nature.
Let's wait until the presentation to full council, and then if we've got areas specifically that we would like to have greater visibility of or greater challenge to, then I would suggest after I discuss with the chair of external, or if it's concerns the financial side, we decide to do it ourselves and we take it forward. Let's leave the work as it is, and let's wait until we've had the we've looked at it at full council. Still within reason, within the sort of bedding in period anyhow. So we've got emerging trends are improving, and the uptake of reserves is reduced. So, but I agree with you. Yeah.
Just point of order: should that be classified as 332, and then the next item 3, so that it doesn't?
I think the numbering is a bit.
Correctly for referencing.
It's a separate. It's a separate item from. It's got nothing to do with housing. That's just a typo in the thing. Thank you for that, Councillor O'Val.
Just before we move on to 332, we seem to have slid past the second thing in the housing thing about how the targets are reached in the 4 units of housing, and about the community safety officer for empty homes. Don't seem to have covered that before we slid on to active storage.
And we haven't had a response on that yet. That's still outstanding. Have we actually addressed that to anybody?
Sorry, Chair, I'm not clear on what
We are this one here.
how targets are reached 4 units of housing after a track record of 0 to speak to the community. It's not I don't Councillor Lavelle, do you know what that refers to? I don't know what that means, and oh, okay, yeah, I don't. So that's probably why it's blank. I don't know what it means to direct. It wouldn't be a community safety officer thing on empty homes. We'll check the minutes from the last meeting just to see if we can get some clarification.
To follow up there, yeah. Something's fallen.
I mean, I know progress on empty homes and new builds and what have you.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're in discussion with the existing service provider, as previously reported. Put on the climate change working group agenda for next week, so we can give an update to members there and we can work forward from that point. But I can't really go into the detail of the conversations at this time. Thanks.
We look forward to receiving that information in the future, but not to let it fall off the action list, because Councillor Bright would be very disappointed. Okay, that concludes the action list. Lengthy but important that we keep things current as we go forward. Moving to item 4 on the agenda, public contributions. We have no. And councillors, I remind you of the rules concerning declaration of interests. Whether you have a personal or a financial interest in any matter, please declare it, and then we can agree the level of abstinence or not that needs to be taken. Urgent matters, I have none. Part 2, so there is no need to do anything on that. Looking to our new HR strategy, as our HR manager, Sarah, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. So we have a current HR which expires this year. So the new strategy looks at actions that we've completed over the last few years, plus actions to work on looking forward. So the aim of an HR strategy is to plan out a set of measures to reach objectives, creating a framework for employees to be recruited, managed and developed. So this helps us with attracting and retaining talent, increasing employee engagement and productivity, and succession planning. So the HR strategy starts with an overview of the challenges and opportunities which to determine the actions for the next few years. So some of the challenges, I think, looking through those, they're as a result of other organisations responding to their own recruitment difficulties. So there's other businesses have offered more attractive terms and conditions. Some other local authorities, supplements and golden hellos, etc. Then equally, there's several opportunities for us. So there's the opportunity to operate more flexibly, continuing to grow our own, so offering training and development for existing staff, investing in our staff, and being open-minded about new opportunities and possibilities. Our people plan, we've broken that down into 5 main areas, so organisational development, workforce planning, staff relations, development of technology, and health and well-being. So I'll just go through each of those briefly. So the strategy, you can see what we've done over the last few years and then the plans for looking forward. So organisational development is about building our capacity to develop and adapt to changing work environments, both internally and externally. So looking back, we've implemented things like a new e-learning module, which has increased the learning opportunities for staff. We've offered training development program for managers, aspiring managers, and we've set up a monthly staff focus group. So we have a representative from each team that meets monthly with the chief executive to discuss any issues that are coming up in their teams. So as well as building on all of that, looking forward, we're going to relook at the comms, so communicate internally with staff. So we've launched a new staff newsletter, but I think there's certainly other opportunities for doing some different things there. Launched our new HR, updated and reviewed all our employment policies. And then another target looking forward is to review our values and behaviours. So we have assessed and behaviours, which are working with others, delivering excellent customer service, adapting and responding to change, and displaying and promoting professional integrity. So during recruitment, we ensure that we base our questions on those values to make sure that we're recruiting a good fit to the team. Workforce planning, so this is about ensuring staff are trained to fulfil their roles and to ensure that we have effective succession planning in place. So we've worked hard to increase our offering for work experience students over the last few years. That's primarily been offering work experience to year 10 students each year, plus university students in the summer. But I think we're increasing that offer. We're going to look at work with primary schools and then offering more than just work experience. So there may be work we can do around help with CV writing, interview practice, etc. Moving on to staff relations. So this is about excellent working relationships with staff across the organisation. We've had a staff survey for several years, so that's an annual staff survey in the autumn. So we will continue with that and then act upon those results. We recognise 2 trade unions here at TDC, so it's continuing to work with a formal mechanism for working with unions, which is a quarterly meeting, again with the Chief Exec and myself. And also staff relations, what's been really important and I think taken off over the last couple of years is the development of social activities, so outside of work for colleagues to get better. So we've had a series of successful, if you like, team building activities. We've had a sports day, we've got a quiz coming, kind of thing. So it's we take recommendations from the staff focus group as to what staff would like us to organise. Development of technology. So how can we use technology to increase the employee experience across the organisation? We do regular reporting to SMT on key employee data. I've already mentioned e-learning, so we rolled that system out. And we also have a joint HR and payroll system, which, as well as people being able to access their pay advice, etc., they are able to book annual leave, they record any sickness on there, we record a training record, so it's a whole employee record. And what we'd like to do going forward is to continue to work on that system, increase for employees and managers. So one of the things we're going to look at is launching a dashboard, a data dashboard for people and see data of staff relating in their team. Also looking at developing the recruitment module and onboarding, so allowing those interested in working for us a more streamlined process. Then lastly, we're looking at health and well-being. So this is about providing a safe, stable and sustainable working environment. Thing we do. We launched an employee assistance program in September 22. So that's can assist employees with physical, emotional health. Includes a wellbeing newsfeed, articles, videos, podcasts, etc. Plus offers savings on everyday spend. So all new staff working for TDC are automatically signed up to that. So the plan is to build on that to make sure there's enough communications so staff know what's available to them. And in addition, equip managers with the necessary skills to support the health and well-being of their team members. So that's a very quick crossovers with the themes. Some of the work planned for the next 3 years we've already started, but we need to develop, but hopefully that gives you a general overview.
So thank you. That's what I like to see in a strategy document. It runs to nearly 6 pages. and really concentrated on the headline goals or issues in that, trying to deal with detail that actually has its place in an operational delivery sense rather than anything else. Questions for the HR manager. Councillor Lovell.
Sorry, I mean, looking at the budget and thingies, we obviously are struggling to retain staff, you know, looking at the agency staff that we're having to pull in. Is there, you know, is a major single reason, recurring reason that you know, is it housing, is it, I don't know, what is it that makes us not able to attract and retain? You know, we seem to be doing money on a par with everybody else and lovely conditions, and look at all the lovely initiatives that have come up. So we're providing a lovely workplace and looking after them. And so what's the barrier to people coming and working for us? Is there, you know, and sometimes people, or do you know what I mean? And obviously that might be personal circumstance and Granny's got poorly, but is there any kind of underlining theme that we can address?
That's your starter for term.
Recruitment has got a little easier actually over the last few months, so there's been less difficulty in recruiting positions. We shortlisted for a position yesterday where we had 26 applications, which is really, really positive, of very good quality. So I think there are harder to fill positions. So HGV drivers has been more difficult for a while, although we currently, I think, have a vacancy. We have interviews planned, so we did have applications, but there is quite a turnover, and it's difficult, I think, for some staff since the pandemic, the option to work from home. So people can work for an employer based in a city that's a lot more money working from home, living in this area, and we're not able to compete with that. But I think all our recruitment recently has been successful. I think the agency staff, so yes, waste and recycling use agency staff fairly regularly. Other agency cover, I don't have the information with me, but there's certainly some roles that have now been filled, so that agency cover will be coming to an end.
I'm going to just bring Stacey in at this point. Yeah.
Just to add a little bit to the agency side of it. Agency isn't always as it kind of appears on the tin. I think that's quite important to clarify. So sometimes we have extra schemes or projects that we have to deliver, and we'll get a sum of money to employ the staff. So one that I can think of, or two that I can think of off the top of my head within my teams, would be Household Support Fund. So that's not a scheme that we ordinarily deliver, but we're given grant funding to employ staff to administer for the time being. The Home for Ukraine scheme is another one. So you get grant funding to administer that scheme. We have it quite a lot in the planning team as well. So we'll have planning performance agreements. One that I can think of at the moment is X-Links, and that's because it's a big project. So you'll enter an agreement where that developer will effectively fund your staff for that time period. So it's not always, we don't always just recruit agency just because we've got a gap in our ordinary staffing, if that makes sense.
Councillor Lavelle, you want to come back? Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's really good news to know that the figures that agency staff are not as bad as they appear in the whatever. So how does that agency funding money get shown as being offset grant funding that you're saying, so that we know not to panic or think that something dire is going on with our...
That's a good question, and one that you would have to direct to finance, because from my perspective, I agree. I'm not the accountant, but how they account for it in the budget is they've probably got it in one line somewhere and another line somewhere So that's why I'm giving you from how I often look at it, how I interpret it from a layperson's point of view. But I'll often say, you know, internally, well, we've got that as agency, but actually I've had the funding in to fund that post. So I'm probably best at this point, Councillor Lavelle, to hand you over to our accountants who will be able to explain that.
Gordon, you want to have a crack at that?
Okay, yes. So if we do have agency spend that's offset, you will have agency in one line. You will have grant funding in another, so we do report on two separate lines. Oftentimes we in the commentary that it's offsetting, but it depends on what you kind of feel is important and how it's presented. So when we're doing it, we like to see this is what we've got in one line, this is what we've got in another, whereas rather than the actual net figure, because otherwise you could just end up with one line at the end. Really, we like to show the various ups and downs.
Yeah, no, it's just that as it is presented, it gives a picture that we're struggling to recruit and retain because we've got this big agency figure. So, I mean, I didn't know it was offset figures, and it's reassuring to know. Yeah, please, that's great. I'm really glad we haven't got anything dire going on that is preventing us retaining and attracting staff, and that indeed the agency staff costs are offset by grants. I didn't know that, and there's loads of stuff I don't know.
Councillor Lavelle, I would totally agree with you, but I'm not. And that's why, you know, so I think we've had I had that conversation as well, because I will often look at it with a blank face when I'm reviewing some of the accounts, but figures have never been my forte, I'm afraid. So
over a period of time, the situation is much improved to where we were. If one considers, if you go back to COVID time, when there was huge demand on remote staff availability anyway, and we were tasked by government with dispensing several of the relief schemes that were done for COVID, like the business relief, etc. And there was a huge amount of work there, which was taken on by staff who were taken off their day job and were put onto other things. And a lot of our areas, and I'm speaking from a point of view of revs, bends and council tax, which I lead member on, a lot of our areas became under a lot of strain, and the working environment was not good as a result, because their day job had got behind and they were dispensing money, etc., handed down through government to the COVID relief packages. And that all contributed. It also, as you know, and we all realise, led to a shift, diametric shift in working habits and patterns. And I, around that time, for instance, interviewed a lady on the Revs and Bends team who was leaving. And I chatted to her just to find out the background of her discontent or why she was leaving, etc., for my own information. And she said, I'm off to work for Citizens Advice Bureau in Telford. And I said, oh, you moving? She said, oh, no. She said, I'm staying here, but I'm going to work for CAB in Telford from Bideford. And it's part of that getting our mind around the fact that where jobs can be done remotely, actually our potential workforce is spread nationally. And we get away from the little old local thing. Because, as Sarah has just mentioned, it works against us the other way, in that we have people based here with the skills that we need who are doing jobs in London, but on London level pay or London sized company pay. So it works in all. That is the situation we find ourselves in, whether you like it or not, whether it's right or wrong, or whether you think it's right or wrong. That is how the world has gone, and we have to adjust and react to that being the case. And now, you know, a lot of our jobs require either face-to-face requirement or on in office or their physical jobs that require you to be driving a truck, and therefore it doesn't apply. But in quite a bit of that skilled area, there's remote side, and we need to embrace that and look it wide. But it is an improving situation, and I was speaking to Reverend Ben's manager only the other day, and they've been we're almost up to full establishment there, and secondly, again, the number of applicants coming forward was most encouraging, whereas 3 years ago we were advertising for jobs and there were no applicants. That was a reflection on the lack of attractiveness. It was a reflection on the demands on the workforce overall. So, you know, we're in a different world, and we've got to live in it, not live in the last world. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Stacey raised, I wouldn't use it as a spectre, but the concept of somebody who was working on our staff on the X-Links project, for example, was funded by X-Link. Is there any conflict of interest? I'm sure there isn't, but it raises a bit of a moral issue, surely.
No, so yeah, just to clarify, they're not determining the application. What they want is guarantee that we can process it through our system as quickly as they want to. So to be able to do that, if we didn't employ more assistants, you're in with our normal planning team. So what we'll say is we can't guarantee that we can turn it around as quickly. If they're funding a member of staff, they don't pick the member of staff, we employ the member of staff, but we dedicate that member of staff to that project. So that's all they're working on effectively. So hopefully that makes sense.
Yes, it does. Thank you. That was my slight concern, as you can probably imagine.
And more to the point, we're putting our hand up at the outset and saying to assist, and therefore there's no who over.
Gentlemen, you both put your hands up.
Mr. Harper, are you after? Sorry.
Over the years, I have noticed the recruitment and actually caused a major problem for Torridge. I have to say I support totally the growing our own people. A couple of things that raise that is, are we going to develop that even further, such as tutors, people who can support and monitor people, but also I've noticed we do e-learning. I'm not, but blended learning is much better. And perhaps the other thing we ought to look at is we work with North Devon District Council and actually develop this model.
Thank you. So yes, we have. So we've had a number of apprenticeships in the past, plus higher level apprenticeships, which are they're study applications at universities. The e-learning module, so we've rolled that out for our mandatory training. So there's safeguarding. Of course, we still send staff away on training courses, although a lot of providers now offer more virtual training courses since the pandemic. So there definitely is a mix of people attending face-to-face training. We work with the local college to provide bespoke training for us. And North Devon, I think we have teams of hosted professional events that they offer places to other councils, so we can do that as well. But the mentoring, etc., so managers have an annual appraisal, should provide regular one-to-ones to their staff, and there was certainly a more informal mentoring scheme set up for new managers, but it's yes, it's something that we could roll out further perhaps and identify other mentors within the authority for new staff.
Mr. Dengate, you had a question.
It was partly to Mr. Harper, which was at one time I thought we had talked about the kind of training, mentoring, buddy system that people went alongside, so that there were designated people in the teams rather than the team members having to do it themselves with their colleagues. I mean, there's advantages and disadvantages of both, I'm sure, but I think we point specific training people, and I didn't know if that was still something that was considered or had kind of moved on with different learning practices.
So for the managers that have the mentoring, it is from other departments. But as I say, it's something I think we could roll out. And we did have staff trained as mentors and coaches several years ago, but again, that's something that we could.
I have one question for you, please. In the strategy, one of the routes of communication, understandably, is through union representation. What do you know percentage-wise? What percentage of the staff are actually represented by or trades union?
I don't know the exact percentage. We here at Torridge we recognise Unison and GMB. So Steve and I have a quarterly meeting with representatives. Unfortunately, we don't have any representatives based at Torridge, so we have a joint Unison branch with North Devon Council. Yep. So we have their branch chair come over to Torridge to attend that meeting. So I think one of the reasons we set up the staff focus group was because we didn't have any reps at Torridge here, so it's to assist, I guess, with the union side of things, so that we have a rep from each team that attends the monthly meeting that can feed back any queries, concerns, any ideas. Absolutely, we've had absolutely everything come forward. Really useful because in the absence of any local representation, I think staff have found that useful. But I don't know the exact figures of membership.
Yes.
Can I just a quick supplementary on that? You mention GMB. You make no mention of GMB in your improving relations. I think it's important that we focus on not just Unison, because you could be misled and think that's it. I think Torridge, to be fair, has even way back in the midst of time when I was here, it was very, very difficult to get people motivated unions. They weren't a union culture. So I'm glad to hear you're working with them. I've got one other quick question. Now, I might have just momentarily been reading and not heard you. You've got something about time recording systems. Now, can you explain what are your objectives in time recording system?
A new clock card system, is that right?
Well, I don't know if it's...
That's what it says.
It won't be clock cut.
That's what it says here, time recording, new clock card system for all office-based staff.
Well, it won't be jing-jing, yes. It will be...
No, it won't.
No.
It won't be. We currently have an in-house system, so we record our hours when we come in for work, when we leave work. So it's, as I understand from our IT department, it's quite an outdated system that is reliant on one member of staff able to run. So there are options to look at recording our time in the HR payroll system. So that's a project that somebody in the HR team will be working at.
Can you just, as a supplementary, sorry, how are staff reacting to this? Is it a welcomed that will offer equality of time recorded across the organisation?
Staff aren't necessarily aware there will be a new system yet, but I don't think staff will notice any particular change. It'll be their hours in the same way, really, just using a different system.
Right, thank you very much.
Anything else? Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Chair. I was just wondering, obviously you spoke about the fact that in this area we've got people working in London at London wages, and that's kind of one of the challenges we face at our staffing level. I was wondering when their what's the funding called, the annual agreement settlement, do they consider that as part of it, that obviously we have to essentially try and match London rates a bit better? And no.
Yeah, I would guess almost certainly not, but I'm looking to whether anybody's got something more.
I'm not aware that they would do that, no.
Is that something we can push on?
Everybody outside London would like that.
But it's national. It's not just
Apart from
here.
London.
You know, it's people sat on the Isles of Hebrides, or it's people sat in. You know, I've got a relation in France who works virtually in London. Geography is no longer the issue that it was in these, especially where you're reliant on IT to do your job.
I completely agree, but maybe places like the Hebrides should also get a bit more funding because they're trying to match London wage along that route. But anyway, if I could have a second question as well, slightly different. Also, you mentioned that you are working with the schools and colleges to try and show a route. Do we go to like year 9 presentations where they start to look at the options they're going to take for the next 2 years of what their subjects are going to be, which is essentially where they're leading a career path? You know, at year 9, you're selecting what your subject's going to be, and if you're going to go into maths in uni or you're going to science or whatever, at that point, that is a key junction. I don't know if we are actually involved at that level or not yet, or.
We do attend the Bideford College Careers Fair, which I think is for year 9s actually. It's held in the autumn, so we do attend that. And I think it's something that obviously is on the work plan for the next few years, to work more closely with schools to see how we can be more available. We know, I guess we don't really get asked, but we'll be approaching them to see what we can do to assist.
Yeah, because my employer, they're very on that. They go out to everything and anything, and we don't have any issues when it comes to apprentice. They're like, we don't know how many to turn away.
Good, thank you. One more, Councillor Smith.
Thank you very much. GTS, Great Torrington School, are very active in that sort of thing, and they have an event at the end of every summer term. And I'm sure you'd be more than welcome to contact us or contact me. I'm a governor there. And it's very, very well attended with all manner of people. So local employers absolutely would snatch your arms off to hear more. The youngsters, rather, would snatch your arms off to hear more.
Yes, we do attend that, actually. I didn't know if that was for year 9s or older, but we definitely do go to the careers event at Torrington.
I didn't see I wasn't at the last one, but I remember not before. But yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
To sum up on that, if we finish with questions, Sarah, thank you very much for updating us on the latest still draft strategy, or is it? Yes, draft. In my short time of 6 years on the council, I would certainly say that we're in a very different place to where we were, certainly in my time, 6 years ago, in terms of how the council projects itself online, how it communicates, and all of that area in the HR area, which is constantly evolving, and I know has, you never take your foot off the gas on it, but it's a much improved place, I think, and there's some very positive signs which are coming out. We're starting to see that being evidenced by more people coming forward, more applications, more people wanting to work with us, etc., which is encouraging stuff. So, thank you very much indeed for your time. Okay, moving on to our enduring core business, which is the quarterly business report and the review of the QBR1. And Who's starting, Anna or Quinn? Anna, I'll let you start with the performance reporting.
Thank you, Chair. Just before we move on, this is a new QBR, so we're starting from scratch because it's aligned to the new strategic plan. This is our performance management cycle. So the strategic plan was adopted by full council in December 2023. The delivery of the strategic plan is recorded in the business plans. Performance against the business plans is then monitored using performance indicators, and the progress is reported in the quarterly business reports. So if you just have a quick look, the business plan, the strategic plan feeds directly into the QBR. So on the left-hand side is the priorities from the strategic plan, and on the right-hand side is the actions. And then this is what it looks like in the QBR. So on the left-hand side is the strategic priorities, the actions in the middle, and then how we report on the progress. And again, the second half of the strategic plan, on the left is the priority, on the right is the actions, and then what it looks like in the QBR. So you've got your priorities on the left, in the middle is the actions, and then the reporting is the narrative that you get to see. So a quick reminder about our near neighbours that we get measured against when we benchmark. The ones that are in grey, so highlights for theme 1. The Harbour team have been very proactive and helped organise 2 visits from the Waverley to Bideford. It created a real buzz around the quay, helped by the weather. Torridge launched its 5th household support fund, and the work placements have started for Petrock. Some of the students have been with us 1 day a week for a year. With the benchmarking, 9% of pensioners claim pension credit. There's a campaign has been launched to raise awareness of and encourage people to apply for this benefit, especially in light of the winter payment changes. Theme 2, so the highlights for Theme 2, Victoria Park Paddling Pool got ready with some repairs for the summer season and was extremely popular over the summer. The council's environmental health team have been involved in some successful prosecutions, including a case of noise nuisance. The bad weather didn't dampen the enthusiasm of the Mayfair celebrations in Torrington, which was shared on our social media page. When benchmarking, Torridge has the second lowest, is the second lowest when it comes to numbers of active adults, according to a survey. And theme 3, the beach cleans at Westwood Ho continue to be well attended and make a difference to the marine life. They're organised every few months. The usual dog restrictions came into force on sections of Westwood Ho Beach in May. Recycling rates continue to be high in Torridge. And when benchmarking, although the fly tipping incidents are low in Torridge compared to our near neighbours, they still present a challenge for the waste team. It has been reported by us on social media and on the website with the hope of discouraging people from fly tipping. And theme 4 highlights a public consultation regarding the new operational services depot was well attended, with local residents able to ask officers about the development. And Torridge continues to encourage and support degree level apprenticeships in building control and planning. When benchmarking, the planning team continue to monitor the planning application decision times. We're mid-table when compared to our SIPFA near neighbour group. And I'll pass you on now to Gwyd, who will do the finance reporting.
Thank you, Anna. Okay, so this first slide here shows the high-level position with a forecast favourable variance at the end of the year of 374,000. Skipping ahead to kind of one of the questions asked in the Q&A was why the finance manager area is worse than budget. So we've got a bit of a quirk here in that we have a corporate budget, a corporate vacancy budget of 488,000. So we recognise that during the year there'll be salary savings arising due to kind of normal levels of staff turnover. It's not really possible to predict where they might arise, so the budget for this sits in the corporate management, And as the vacancies arise in other areas, these favourable variances are offset by an adverse variance in the finance manager section until that budget figure is met. So only then do any further savings produce a net favourable variance. And on the highlights section here, this shows the significant forecast variances of 25,000 and over. Being the first quarter of the year, there aren't many lines which have moved, so these variances are analysed a bit further on the next slide. The adverse variances, we have our staff costs of 67,000. This is made up of agency costs of 78,000, 57 of which is covering vacancies and 21,000 providing additional resource. This is offset by 11,000 of salary cost savings. And we've got computer software of 42,000, which was the renewal of the HR payroll software iTrent. On the favourable variances, we've got interest, government grants, services by private contractors and homelessness costs. So bank interest rates were higher than forecast when we set the budget. Government grants would be predominantly the homelessness prevention grant, which was uplifted by £125,000 after budgets were set. But also you see in this, we've got like planning skills grants and things like that. So the main factor in the services by private contractors is the reduction of the management fee paid to Active Torridge for managing the leisure centres. They set their budgets after receiving their final account sign-off in April or May, which unfortunately doesn't really align with our budget set in timescales, so quite often get a variance there. Our N&I services came in at £4,000 under budget, and we are expecting to overspend slightly on vehicle maintenance costs. The cost of providing temporary accommodation is forecast to be down by 68,000 due to slightly reduced numbers of people requiring housing and our investments on additional capacity, decreasing reliance on third-party suppliers. We're looking at the key income streams. I won't go through everything, but the car parking income is down. Presumably the poor weather over the summer will have had an impact on visitor numbers, and also the timing of the Easter holidays. Rental income is currently up against budget, but the figures are skewed by kind of upfront rental payments, so this is expected to come back into line over time. The harbour income is up due to the sand dredging campaign and visits of the Waverley. Most of the other lines there are close to budget. If we're looking on the salaries, we're currently under budget, but we're still awaiting the 24-25 pay award, which will be backdated to April. Agency staff makes up 7% of total staff costs, which is comparable to last year. I think it was 8%. At the end of June, there were 14 vacant posts, of which 3 are being covered by agency staff. 8 of those posts have a new starter in place. You see Refuse has 2 vacant posts. As stated, the agency spend is 7% of total staff costs, and Refuse makes up about 32% of that. The snapshot at the end of June, there were 18 agency staff, 7 in Refuse and 11 in other departments. So as a snapshot, it goes up and down throughout the year. It doesn't necessarily represent the total number of agency staff used throughout the year. It gives an idea of the current numbers. You may note there are 7 agency staff in Refuse, but only 2 vacancies. But this could be for many reasons, such as covering short-term sicknesses, maternity payment leave, etc. We've had a graph in here which shows the trend in vacancies, which is currently on a downward trajectory. Moving on to temporary accommodation. So this is a new thing we've put in here. So I've added a graph and a table showing the current costs of providing temporary accommodation to persons who are currently homeless, as this is one of the major financial risks facing the council. We can see from the graph that these costs greatly increased after COVID in 22-23, while a lot of efforts continues to go into bringing these down to more sustainable levels. It's still significant impact on the council's finances. We've broken down the cost of temporary accommodation provision into 3 categories. There are the TDC-owned units, so this would be our hostels and modular accommodations. And we have private sector leases, or leases which are properties which Torridge leases from landlords, and then currently sublets out. And then there are spot purchases, which would be the nightly paid accommodations, such as hotels, etc. So as you can see, Torridge-owned units basically break even. For PSLs, we recover around 71% of the costs. And for the spot purchase accommodation is the most expensive. It accounts for 79% of costs, but only 28% of placements. If we move on to the capital reserve section, the format of this table has been slightly revamped to make it a little bit easier to understand. It shows that we have spent 660,000 out of a capital programme budget of 15.5 million for the year, and that the overall capital programme budget up to 28-29 is 39.8 million. The largest line for 24-25 is property infrastructure, which includes the operational centre. And the largest overall is a regeneration, which includes the Appledore Clean Marine Centre. Moving on to the reserves. Council holds various reserves earmarked for revenue and capital purpose. At the start of the year, it was 4.6 million and 8.1 million respectively. We have since put into reserve a further 1.1 million and spent from reserve 376,000. We have committed spend of 954,000 for revenue and 8.6 million for capital, which gives a balance of 3.4 million in revenue reserves and 3.9 million at the end of the year. And finally, investments. At the end of June, we had £15 million in short-term treasury deposits. The maturity dates of each deposit is noted. We had 8.2 million in the deposit account, giving a total on deposit of 23.2 million. There are currently no green ethical investments, as there are not any which offer the rates currently required by the Treasury Management Policy, which is 0.2% below current market rate. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Lovell.
I'm never sure if I'm asking the right question at the right time in the right place, so I apologise. I was just wanted clarification when it was said that 9% of pensioners claim pension credit. Is that 9% of those who are entitled to claim pension credit, or is that 9% of all pensioners are claiming pension credit? See what I mean? Are we looking at like a huge number of pensioners that are entitled to pension credit who aren't claiming it?
The answer to that, Councillor Velez, we don't know, because it's not, Torridge isn't responsible for administering pension credit, it's the DWP. So the statistics will come from that organisation. The only thing we can say is we're assisting DWP with trying to push the message out there with those that are eligible to claim, please do claim, but it's not something that's administered through Torridge.
So, I just wondered what the 9% referred to.
Yeah, I think that's figures that we've got from the DWP, but I don't know whether they've got records of who's eligible and who's not, or if that's just those that are claiming currently. So it's not figures that have emanated from Torridge, so I can't really give any more clarification on that. Sorry.
Okay. And I'm sure it's not the time to talk about fly tipping. No, I'm sure I'd like to talk about fly tipping, but it's not obviously not the right time.
Are you asking a question,
No,
Councillor
I'm not.
Novell,
I'm saying
or
I'm shutting up. I'm shutting up.
Okay. As always, because several events have moved on since this, and one must remind yourself that this is as at June of this year. So with hindsight, we're wise on some of these things because things have moved on, but we must only concentrate our scrutiny up to June. Could you just whack that, go back into the slides, Anne, and go back to your very first slide with the performance management cycle on it, please? There. Just if I can implore committee members and any other councillor who watches this presentation, understanding that graph is essential, And if you don't understand the processes of a performance management cycle and how strategic planning works in a wider sense, then you cannot effectively interpret the data that's offered to you through the QBR. So you have to understand that, and you have to be respectful of the process that things take in order to achieve an output at the end of the day. So I just reinforce that. The other thing I would reinforce at this point is that through the corporate peer review that we have had, our process of QBR was commented on very favourably and was picked out as a positive, which is good, and the fact that we revisit the process periodically and update it, and indeed we've just recently revisited. Mr. Dengate.
Could I just ask that be recorded either as an appendix to the minutes, or because obviously it's not in the main papers of the meeting, it would be helpful if that was noted in some way.
I agree. Are we able to bring that slide into the can we do that as part of minutes? Thank you, Kirsty. Anything else on that? Okay, let's move now to the questions. And I have a sort of statement at the beginning of these, and that is people will have noted that unusually included in the questions are some questions which have come from some of the members of the senior management team. There's been a slight process hiccup here. These questions would always be asked by members of the senior management team as an internal exercise, but they wouldn't come to us because that is they doing their own system. Through a slight hiccup in the process, those questions this time have popped up on our question sheet. It isn't a change of procedure, and normally we would not see those questions. However, having looked at it, those questions are now in the public domain. They have been published, and therefore we will take those questions this morning together with everything else in a perfectly normal way. But routinely, we would not expect to see the questions. It is comforting to see that the senior management team are actually asking each other and interrogating each other of questions on the process. So actually it's a little glimpse of what's going on in the background that you don't normally see, that they are actually challenging each other. But no, they are not attempting to mark their own homework, so to speak, here. Is that quite clear on that one? Councillor Bright, yes.
Can I just welcome the questions and comments? I was like, oh yeah, that's a good one, and thinking through, because you know, more opinions is always good in my view.
Yes, here in the Act and the world of scrutiny, and because the QBR the ownership of the data in the QBR and the compiling of the QBR is a role and a task of our officers, which is then presented to members, and we are scrutinising that data that's presented. It wouldn't be, at this stage in committee, be appropriate for officers to be asking questions on their own work, if you follow me, from a scrutiny point of view. But I get you just. I'm happy to see, though, that actually that robust system's going on. That public announcement being made, let's move straight to the questions which appear as agenda item 9. There's quite a lot of them are quite lengthy. I'm not going to read them all out other than the headline, and then I will address the questioner to see if they're satisfied with the response. So, first of all, looking at performance highlights, questions from Ian Harper on page 2, small businesses in Torridge. and you were asking how many, do we know how many SMEs and micro businesses there are in Torridge? And there we have responsive figures and the fact that we don't know a breakdown of what sectors they're all in. Are you happy with that response?
Yes, and I think actually it shows that the problems we have actually in Torridge, the vast majority are probably owner, single person operating companies.
Moving again from Ian Harper, Household Support Fund, your question, which concerned how we actually communicate with those who might have an entitlement or a need for this level of support, is a question that's been raised many times in the past. I'm looking at Councillor Pennington now. I seem to recall that he's raised similar things in the past. And it is an ongoing issue. How do you get to these people? Because they don't necessarily read or watch or listen to the same things that you or I or officers do. And it's trying to be clever to see how to get there. And there we have a response, talks about the communication team and what they do and what we now do, also the fact that they work with benefits and customer service teams to create flyers containing information. I'd add, within my ward, and each of my population centres have their own community Facebook pages, and whenever we have new funding initiatives here, I always pick up and replicate the Torridge produced Facebook flyer onto my local group pages, which again, it just contributes to everything else. But councillors and everybody else have a role in this. And then you go on to say, does Torridge offer active support in filling in application forms for these benefits? And the answer is yes, that there are. When that connection is made, it is difficult. And there is separately. There is, and I know from the Revs and Ben's team, there is a continual, often struggle at times with getting people to submit or provide data in a form that we can handle and cope and interpret, when indeed they are not either wanting to or they struggle with completing the various ways of getting data to us. So it happens in different ways all the time, and one's often, of course, dealing often with people in similar situation. Are you happy with those? It's actually a good question, but are you happy with the response on that?
It partially answers some of the questions, but I listened today, we're actually talking about now informing people over the net again. And let's face it, sometimes some of these hard-to-reach people don't necessarily have that is just one of the ways of, it's just one of multiple ways of informing them. Yes, but as I say, it was certainly mentioned once, quite a few times, that this is the way in which we process or actually do the things. The trouble is, we live in a very poor area with connectivity.
Yep.
And we also have a population as well, and a lot of people don't do Facebook, don't do WhatsApp and all the rest of it. So it's how, and they have answered part of the problem thing, but how do we actually reach those people? As you say quite rightly, it's through people like yourself and others actually working it down and into the communities.
So we work with Encompass, a charity, TTVS, other organisations, Navigate, to push that message out. And I think the indication is we've spent each fund fully, and actually Household Support Fund round 5, we've asked Devon County for some more money because it's due to end in end of September, and we were running out of funds and we had another 10. So You know, we do our best. As Councillor Newton said, I always think as well it is a lot with members to push that out to their parishes as well. But I think the fact that each and every fund has been spent does indicate that we are definitely getting that message out there.
We're certainly not handing money back, which in any budgetary sense is normally a wicked crime if you have not actually been able to spend the money you've been given. Moving on, question from Councillor Elliott, who very sadly isn't. And he touches on a favourite subject of ours, really, which is concerning the activity and income of the harbour. And he specifically refers to the visits by the Waverley, and he asks if such visits can be increased in the future. And what about cruise ships and using tenders to bring the passengers in, etc. And the harbour master replies, referring to actually the Waverley's 2 visits this year was directly due to proactive work from the harbour master team in Torridge to actually get them to come, and they are in discussions for more calls of visits next year. And he also goes on to point out that they are constantly in communication with organisations, cruise companies, etc. There are technical issues with larger ships here. It's not just a question of putting people into a tender and punting them up the Torridge, because our tidal window makes a very short visit, and these things at the end of the day have to be commercially viable for the cruise companies. That is what they do. They make their money through running cruise things. So they will only come if it's going to actually work for them. And because of the difficulties of our tide, etc., and access, it doesn't make it that easy, in fact, for cruise ships to come here. But more work like from the Waverley, etc., are, of course, encouraged. Whether members feel that this changes the with the harbour that we've commented on many times in the past, I'm sure somebody like Mr. Harper will have a view on it.
Personally, I think that's the way the harbour goes. The clay boats are gone, so now it becomes more of a, exactly as the harbour master says, a heritage port and also a leisure port.
And this links well with our desire in the past of this committee to have a more view of the whole estuary, which includes the harbour, to look at all the ways that we can make this asset work for the region, and also to take us away from perhaps historic and slightly outdated views as to what the harbour was rather than is, and will be. And we are in an agreement now of a degree of refresh of the estuary strategy. I'm looking at Sean Kearney here, rather than a rewrite, which was not in the strategic plan anyway. So we were asking for something that actually hadn't been included in the strategic plan, but we're looking at an existing piece of work, very dated, being updated. Actually, it can contribute. Am I right there, Sean? Just got that right? Do we have an idea of a timeline on that?
I'll speak. No, I don't for you, but I can get something circulated. I need to liaise with Chris. Now everyone's back from summer.
For our forward plan, it would be useful if we could start to have a stab at a timeline on that refreshed and updated estuary strategy. because leisure, tourism, etc., are, you know, going to be the main drivers of anything that happens on the water there these days, clearly. So that's a thorough, complete answer from the Harbour Master there. Moving to budget monitoring and narrative. Here we had an internal question, and if you're wiser by the very technical answer, then you're a better man than I. From Sean Kerr, who was asking for an explanation as to how the accounting was done to cover vacancies. And the explanation being that there is a single corporate vacancy budget that's maintained, but then that is cross-referenced to individual departments or functional heads, and there were various, that was either a credit or a debit against the central fund, in effect. An interest of accounting, ladies and gentlemen, it has no consequence on us as a committee. I think we just note it as interesting, probably confirming that it's an accounting speciality. Does anybody want to comment on that or not? I don't. Peculiarity. Yes, quite. And very, very, very good lesson to keep our noses out of accountants' business. Because you quickly become confused. Right, moving on. Question from Councillor Pennington. This concerned favourable variances, i.e. where things had performed better, cost us less, or we had generated more money than what was forecast. This concerned, he was asking, under services by private contractors, what exactly these services were provided. And
I didn't read it properly, Chair. It was answered then in the next page, and I should have read the next page to start with when it said the 21, and then it fully explained it later on. So I wrote the question, and I thought I'd just go send it because I wrote the question. That's
all right. Don't worry. As was pointed out there, and the snapshot from the report is shown there, the breakdown, which, as we heard, was taking less of their fee, RNLI costing less, and then vehicle maintenance costing a little bit more, which came. As a result, you are happy with that, Councillor Pennington? Thank you. Yeah. Next question, which is an internal one from the Chief Executive, and that was concerning temporary accommodation. He wanted to know that in the table where we show income in the costs recovered through fees and charges, did that include housing benefit? And if so, then should it be shown separately as a fee or a charge? If not, where's housing? If not, where is the housing benefit shown? The response here, Gwynne, do you want to elaborate on that or not? You wrote response. Your name's on the bottom of it. It points out that the majority of tenants, obviously, are in receipt of housing benefit, and some may be paying a top to settle the final amount, but sorry, I'm just reading it through again.
My apologies, Chair, while you're pondering.
You're away.
I have got to go.
That's okay.
I apologise to the committee, but I'm at a conference in the wilds of Ilfracombe. So,
You may not. What? I think you're saying here that actually it's all lumped in. Is that correct? You're not saying it's not split out.
It's not split out on there. We've published fees and charges in the fees and charges booklet, which has got the amount we charge for the hospitals, the amount we charge for the PSLs and everything. And so kind of where that comes from, I've considered it under fees and charges rather than housing benefits, because the housing benefits would rather defray those fees and charges. Correct. But it may be better just to say costs recovered rather than costs recovered from fees. Might be a better
ultimately, it's the same. It's money we're getting in from another source. From to DWP. Offset providing, which is Great. Questions? Mr. Dengate.
Just to endorse that, it's too difficult to break that down and quantify it because there's too many variants on individual claimants' conditions. So.
Yes, I'll change the description to make it clearer going forwards.
I don't have much to, the comment came from, I was discussing with the Chief Exec in respect of the charges that we report on temporary accommodation. I was a little bit confused myself from the perspective that although we have so last year, for example, we had a 1.3 million spend on temporary accommodation, but what I couldn't see coming in was the income that we received. So just because we're providing temporary accommodation doesn't mean we're fitting all of the cost for that. So I wanted a more accurate figure reflected as to what, yes, some are entitled to housing benefits, so we may recover that rent as landlord, and some pay top-ups on their fees. So I wanted it a bit clearer. Again, it's probably accounting principles that I don't necessarily understand, but in the black and white, when you're running a housing service, wanting to see actually what is our net position on that.
Good, moving on. Question from Ian Harper concerning key income streams. And he was wanting to understand if there were trends, a correlation between parking income, which was down against last year, but there'd been a price rise, and the fixed penalty income, which had gone up this year, and with a suggestion, presumably, was an increase in parking fees, meaning more people were charged not paying, and therefore were being caught and prosecuted or picking up fixed penalties. And again, similar for Northern Borough. And the senior accountant replied that didn't believe there's a correlation between parking income and price increases. The key factor this year, as we heard in the presentation, is weather. There's also a little bit of timing involved here. Easter was at the end of March, and therefore had an impact on this due to, first of all, Northern Boroughs doesn't start charging till the 1st of April. Secondly, the increase in parking fees doesn't happen until the 1st. And also school holidays, Easter school holidays, commenced in March, therefore reduction in visiting car parking in comparison to the same year. So you've got an example actually that you can't always compare like for like, especially when you've got variables like a key holiday, Easter here, which brings in a lot of visitors from outside, and therefore on things like car parking, because there's many more cars that need to be parked, etc. And if that sits before the beginning of the financial year, and yet the next year it sits on the other side, the 1st of April, and it gets caught in the... it's a good example. You always need to just ask a bit of detail at times to see where things... You're happy with that response? You think it's done? You don't agree?
No, it's just the view that I get from outside that people think the car parking is now it's getting to quite a high rate for local people. And certainly, I would think there may well be a correlation, but yes, I will wait and look at future information.
Very interesting. As a matter of principle, it's an interesting point you raise there, because it's a point that is going to come up in a minute, raised by a question raised by Councillor Pennington, and that is looking at national trends. Locally, car parking has risen quite a bit in recent years. Nationally, especially compared to some other tourist, high density tourist areas, our parking is very good value. And you would pay an awful lot more to park elsewhere in other parts of the country. So again, it's interesting just to when you look at things nationally compared. And what is it? It's the fact that the charges have gone up, and therefore people locally have noticed it. In terms of what you would pay if you were in some of the other areas around the country, actually, we're still probably well below what is being charged elsewhere.
The other point I'd make on that is the fact that we actually have a low-wage, low-income stream in this Absolutely. So therefore, comparing like, once again, as you say, comparing like with like, that's something you ought to put into the equation.
And having been part of this discussion before, don't believe in setting parking charges. That's something that goes through CNR. But there is a dilemma as to how do you accommodate local people who need to park quite reasonably. So how do you, without disadvantaging people, but how do you maximise the potential of the visitor tourist parking? Do you have different car parks at different rates, etc.? It's a difficult one to square, but absolutely, there's things. I'm going to go in a minute back to Gordon. Yeah. Mm.
But also, of course, remembering that we are still trying to improve visitor experience. So there was £500 spent last year as well.
Gordon, thank you. Councillor Bright.
Thank you, Chair. I'll challenge your comments that we're one of the largest, lowest charging car park in the country, because I'm pretty sure there's a lot of places around this area that charge nothing for car parking, so they're significantly lower than us.
Listen to the details, sir. Holiday areas, and I know because I was involved several years ago. I was involved in the car park scrutiny, where actually car park charges of different areas of the country were raised and compared, and in holiday areas, and in some places actually deliberately ramp up their costs in certain car parks in the season. Bring it right down outside. There's all sorts of different ways of doing it. It's not our job to get involved in the policy of car parking. It's not here. No. Councillor Pennington.
Just to say, we need motorhome.
I'm not quite sure they're on an equal balance, but I wouldn't be, and I'll be in trouble with the good residents of Northam if I say anything more, so I should have. Well, Councillor Bright.
Can I highlight that there are several car parks in Biddyford that are free, which are essentially competing against whilst also charging. Yeah. Yeah, I agree that they are giving a service, but are we not also giving a service?
Back to Mr. Harper. Are you happy with the response and the discussion that has happened as a result of the question?
It's fine, thanks.
Moving on, local economy. Councillor Inch asking question re land charges. and asking for the reason for the good improvement in land charges. And this is timing of land charges, of processing things. And Tom Vanstone points out there that we're on to a good turnaround time now, and by comparison to how it was, where there was a lot of additional work as the team prepared for basically the digitization of land charges register, and that required there was an awful lot of background work going on, and as that delay, it extended the amount of time it was being taken to turn applications around. That work's now been done, which means that the team are actually able to turn things around faster again now. So that is explanation. Happy with that? You happy with that, Sam? Question from Councillor Pennington, economic development. Your favourite area, Councillor Pennington, comparing increase in universal credit claimants across Western England, and Torridge does worst. Why is this happening? When comparing average earnings, Torridge is lagging well behind the South West and England. Again, same question as before. And your comment that it appears even greater inequalities are taking place. Mr. Harper asked a question. Disappointing to see Torridge performing down against the Southwest and national average. And the Economic Development Manager, Chris Fuller, answers there. We can, and as he points out, on future strategies and plans that are designed in time, over a period of time, to lift the various ways and circumstances in which people live and work here in this region, which should hopefully contribute towards an improvement across all of these areas. It's not something that Torridge can really answer for on spec. I noticed that Chris also says here, there's also a context piece here. Earnings by household over previous years in Torridge have improved as employment opportunities have been opened up by remote working and through people living locally whose businesses are registered elsewhere. But this picture is not the entire community or economy. It needs to be addressed over time as laid out above. Again, you can't clump everybody together on this one. You will have a view, Councillor Pennington.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, for allowing me to speak. Yes, I have organisations where you have to put bids together, and I find this quite strong when I'm putting bids for social values, because it does highlight the needs we have within our communities. And this is the evidence that I have before me that I can use to explain to others the need we have within our area. And I don't want to undermine these figures because that's what you've given us to measure. And if we don't use these measures and go to government and say, look, we need Appledore Maritime Centre, etc., because of these figures, it support the fact the needs we have here.
And
in the light of
yeah, absolutely. And that's a constructive use of figures are disappointing and are not what we'd want them to be, but it is then a constructive use of those figures, of that data, as evidence to support, as you said, our It may be for money, it may be for investment, it may be for a number of other things. Anybody else want to comment on that in particular? Mr. Harper, because you were, half the question was yours.
The only thing I'd say is the last sentence that Chris Fuller put in there. The fact is, if we don't get this right, we'll only widen and we'll get even worse.
Mm. Absolutely. And it has to be, it can only long-term be addressed. Yes, we're into politics here. It can only, my view, it can only be addressed long-term by continued investment and continued growth of employment opportunities. That's what drives everything. Handing out cash on the street corner is not the answer. It may be a short-term fix, but it doesn't create any long-term answer. So it's the identifying how we can actually skills and improve the work opportunities and therefore lift the wage and salary base in this region, improve other people bringing money in. Inward investment is key. There isn't the money here to invest. We're reliant on other people coming in. And all of those things that all join together. Councillor Punnington.
Yeah, just to say, when you're trying to advertise Torridge up in England, people do not know where. Last week we had national television coverage regarding the X-Links cable route coming in, a wonderful picture of Abbottshire Cliffs, looking out to Lundy, saying this is where we live, and it was all about North Devon. Why do not we publicise Torridge? Why? Or do we change our name to Lundy? Because when I speak to people where's Torridge, I say Lundy, they know it because of the weather forecasts and the weather area. And we have to have an identity that Torridge can sell. And we seem to be missing our communications team of how we get what Torridge is, where Torridge is, what it stands for. And we need to work on that strongly, I think, Chair.
Mm. You're into a completely different debate there, because there is a debate. There is also an argument that you can be too small and that actually you need to be larger. And that's a completely different, and I'm not going down that rabbit hole now, or inciting open warfare. Yeah, it is, we will always suffer from being a small council. I mean, certainly in population and in budgetary size, we are small. Geographically, we're not necessarily particularly small, but we are on the smaller size, and that will always, you know, have an impact. But I hear you entirely. Moving on. We have two more questions here from the Chief Executive, which of which one was where he points out that there's discussion about the joint and that it was referred to as the new local plan. It refers to an update of the local plan rather than a new local plan. And that's been updated, technical word. And then also, again, we are looking at, under our council, again, the Chief Executive, he was a number of technical questions, and he's questioning, I think it's more important to see that these questions are being asked of the staff, wider staff, and he's wanting to know why in one area something was 42 days over target in the response time, and another where presumably we're talking about a planning application, one was out of time, and then again he wanted to know when the triage will result in improvements to time frames, and that was in connection again with planning applications, because it's all answered by, or rather than enforcement planning everything, by Helen Smith, the planning manager. I won't go through the detail of those, but it's just, again, good evidence just to see there that internally managers are being poked by the chief executive to explain various performance-related figures where they, for whatever reason, they're not performing as would be desired, or a particular area is not performing. Back to a question from Councillor Elliott. He refers to planning enforcement and what is basically the impact by the loss of the temporary third enforcement officer. And Helen Smith, planning manager, says yes, there will be an impact on capacity, so the figure would be higher if we had three full-time officers. Again, a recruitment issue. And then I think we've already addressed the last one, which was from Councillor, which was the apparent omission, and that was the active torrid key performance indicators, when I'd said they were opaque, and as a result, they didn't appear at all in this one, which was the easiest thing, just take it away. And the answer was that actually the KPIs are reported annually, so we only see them once a year. So as a result, this being QBR1, they don't appear in this. It wasn't active torrid, just home and not wanting to play at all. Any further questions on that? Councillor Smith.
I'm not sure if it relates to what we've immediately been talking about, but going back, if I may, to the key significant adverse variances, which I've got on page 4.
Yeah.
It's a very small amount, but it's the tip of an iceberg question. Computer software, 40k HR and payroll contract renewal for iTrent was higher than expected. Now, for a contract, we should know what to expect, surely. And if it was higher than that, are we locked into that contract, or do we have the opportunity to have 2 or 3, I believe it's 3, what's the word? We go with 3 other, yeah. It's a tip of an iceberg. It only applies to this, but it's a general question.
I can answer this one, because again, I was involved in the discussion on it. The budget, all right? The budget estimated was a projection of what it would cost to renew the contract. But actually, when it came to be renewed, the prices had changed and skewed. Anybody going to add on that?
This is the system that I referred to in our strategy. So we implemented in 2020, and yes, when it came for renewal, the price had had gone up quite a lot. But I think what we've done is it took us 2 years to implement the system. By the time you build it for all your terms and conditions, all the staff details, so we've actually diarised to look, I think, in a year's time, and then we'll look at other systems rather than just automatically renewing this one. It will allow us that time.
That's exactly
your concern, Councillor Smith, was that this wasn't a contract that we were signed into that suddenly got more expensive than what we'd signed up to. This was the renewal of something. We'd estimated what it would cost, but actually when we got to it, for various reasons, it was more expensive. Thank you, Councillor.
Absolutely, I agree. But at the same time, if it is coming to renewal, surely we get 2 or 3 different estimates. But you've explained why we don't, because it's the lag time of several years to implement. It's a vexed question, and that's why it's not specific to this particular. It applies in general.
Yeah. And this particular thing, the funding line of this went through CNR before
Yes.
it was approved anyway.
Yeah.
So that's okay. Anything else, ladies and gentlemen? Therefore, in fact, we need to do the forward plan. Have we got a forward plan? We haven't got a forward plan. Sorry, I'm without detail of the cover sheet. It will take 2 seconds. There is the presentation of the annual report. For some inextricable reason, it was delayed because of PERDA. Quite how this qualified to come under PERDA, I don't know, but anyway, of the general election. The red hot political document, not. So you'll just see there, very simple summary of our activity last year. Confirms the scope of our responsibility, confirms the members who had been involved over last year, talks about what we did, the reviews of the QBR, obviously, throughout the year, the social value policy, the capital programme, medium-term financial strategy, and then we also reviewed the actual QBR process. Then in addition to that, our work programme, we set up a social value task and finish group and agreed terms of reference. We looked at census results and report. We took an update from Sustainability and Climate Officer on the carbon neutral target. We looked at environmental enforcement, workload and capacity. We looked at planning enforcement, workload and capacity. We took an update on the strategic asset management plan, looked at affordable housing levels, and then we looked at the social value policy once that had been put together. And then there is the summary there of the QBR and medium-term financial strategy over the year, review of the QBR process, and then more detail on the various headlines that I read out just then of the various different bits of work that we did or were done on our behalf throughout the year. A statement that future work programme that we continue to scrutinise and monitor, and that goes through all the standard things, obviously the performance budget and financial strategy through the quarterly business reports. We're continuing to keep an eye on in-house works like maintenance, the housing situation and strategy, planning enforcement capacity and backlog, strategic asset management plan, which is something that we have a close eye on, looking at the new plan when it's constructed, economic strategy, looking at empty properties, and as I've confirmed with Sean Kenny, the estuary strategy. That is the report for this year. Anybody, any comment on that report? Does that need to be voted on?
Goes to full council, no.
Do I need a vote in order to take it
No,
to...
as long as if everyone's happy with that, and then it'll be presented to full council with the work, just presenting the work that's been done by the committee this year.
Everybody comment on that? Good. Moving ahead then to the forward plan. So, cycle 3 is today, cycle 4. At the moment, the only thing that we've got potentially in on the 15th of October EV charging points, and we may not yet see that either. I'm not sure whether. And that is very much the climate change working group providing information to us on what they're looking at. And then in November is QBR again, and then we're looking at asset management plan in January. Anybody at this point got suggestions of things that they would like to bring into there? I'm looking especially at our two independents, so you're good at spotting things that should be brought into that. Have we got any thoughts at this point?
The only one would have been the active storage, but we're waiting on that, so I think we need perhaps think of
yes, quite. I mean,
down
we're
the line for that one.
Having agreed that we're going to wait until after the full council meeting. When is that coming to a full council? Can we just...
14th of October. Yeah, 14th of October. So there's some decisions that full council need to make in relation to that contract and the funding of active storage. So you're going to be too soon to scrutinise that, depending upon what full council. There's a full leisure report coming.
So that would be potentially it would be in November. Could we do that?
However, I was just about to say, if it was membership details and items like that that you want presented, or we could have that here.
Yeah.
Over what they've done over the last couple of years.
I think what I'd rather wait and pick it up. I think if we call it a follow-up to items arising from the presentation to full council, so we leave it fairly open, and if we can catch in that, Kirsty, the outstanding items that we have to ONS external, where are we getting the detail that we've asked for anyway, which we think is already held by being presented to external. And we can then add any extras from that once we've seen what comes up at full council. So let's put that in for the October meeting, which is active storage, a number of things, and potentially things that will fall out of the presentation to full council. What else? Yes, Mr. Dengate.
The reserves policy was something that was going to be put, I think, this coming for the next year.
Just looking at Gordon, that
so I assume the work will be done. Will that information come to us in the budget special, or will we have something before?
It will be in advance. It will be in the middle of October or in November full councils for that paper report. But it will be in advance of the budget setting for 2026.
the reserves policy as such, or
The deliberation around the necessity of a reserves policy.
right? Okay. So there's nothing. I'm just thinking aloud. There's nothing we can do in this committee in advance of that, because we, in part, kicked it off by saying we think that actually there should be a more deliberate reserves policy. So that's fine. It's now up to what you present to full council and the view of full council. I don't think there's any merit in us trying to discuss the matter in advance.
No, it isn't necessarily naturally for this committee.
Yeah. I just note that it's in hand and it's actually coming to full council in later this year. So therefore something is happening, yes.
The only other one I've got is wanted to, and we've discussed it quite infinitely over the years, empty homes. It has been in the peer reviews and previous peer reviews as well.
We've discussed this recently, though. How recently did we talk? I mean, we've had Phil Gilbert been in.
It's something that's being captured in the housing strategy, which is currently being prepared. So again, maybe a little bit too soon. That process is currently underway.
Timeline on the housing strategy. Well,
we do. We do.
If certain members had their own way, never.
That's coming to full council later on in the year, or a draft of that is coming to full council later on in the year, if members agree it prior to going out to consultation. I think it's on the November full council committee.
Is that something that we can recently ask to look at on its routes to full council?
I think there's been lots and lots of member discussion, because we've had a workshop, and then I think there's been discussion about having another member prior to, but for the life of me, I can't remember how that was left, or whether there was going to be another workshop put in.
Well, it hasn't been. That's just member chat at the moment.
Okay.
I think.
So, the moment, and it is a draft, and members will have their opportunity to comment on the draft and amend that draft at full council prior to it going to out to public consultation.
I think the overall housing strategy, because of the involvement of workshops, I agree, and the breadth of it, it wouldn't be appropriate to try to, and we couldn't get it in anyway, because that full council is on the 4th of, is that the November one we think it's going to head for?
Yes.
Yeah, 4th of November. And it wouldn't be ready to come to us before then. So I think the knowledge we note, or the point we note, is that empty contained within the strategy. But there's a lot of multi-stranded work going on that at the moment, which we've all been involved in, and is still going on. So I don't think on this occasion it's something that we could reasonably contribute to, especially the scope of the consultation and the scope of member involvement in producing it. I'm not sure that this committee necessarily has a role then in wanting to fiddle with it before it, or make recommendations before it got to, because it's going to draft to full council. It's not a fait accompli. Even then, it will be going out to consultation. Anything else at this stage? Mr. Denge.
I didn't quite catch from Sean Kearney what the timeline for the estuary strategy was. He said he'd send you an email, which is very helpful, but I don't know if that'll have anything in it.
Can we make a point to, Sean actually did suggest that he would try to let us have a timeline on that.
Well, I did think I'd put it on the action list.